And this was an ecosystem that it had hickories, it had oaks. So there's black oak savannas, which probably dominated more acidic soils. Bur oak probably dominated more alkaline. And then there's hickories mixed in there, hazelnuts, plums, which we're going to talk about both of those later. This landscape was one of the landscapes that the Indians maintained, and even in some ways promoted. So in the eastern deciduous biome that we're in, a lot of our oak savannas were perpetuated through the Indians burning the understories, which promoted prairie and fire-tolerant trees. The fire-tolerant trees are the savanna trees, which also grow in the forest, but hickories and oaks and those shrubs that resprout vigorously after fire, like hazelnut and gray dogwood and other shrubs. So they maintained, and as one of their major food sources, being the bison, and one day perhaps the cattle, use these savanna ecosystems after burning the prairie, because burning the prairie released all of the minerals that were locked in thatch, plus locked in the vegetation grown from the past year, quickly releases the minerals and makes them highly available, and then the plants just take all that in, and plus it warms up the soil quicker too when there's no thatch. But adding trees and shrubs to your landscape, you can do it in this beautiful, really ancient format of an ecosystem that was one of the ecosystems that Native Americans sustained themselves with. So there's just another oak savanna, big spreading trees. The trees are spaced out because some soil condition or climate condition is preventing them from having the growth abilities to fully make a forest. That's why there's a savanna. So it's like there's prairies, then there's transitions into savannas, and when the conditions are good enough for forest, then it becomes forest where there's no sun hitting the ground, and you can't have any wildflower, no prairie wildflowers can survive in the forest. Then you just get the spring ephemerals in the forest. But so this landscape was not only one of the most productive landscapes and beautiful landscapes of America pre-settlement, but it also can be one of the most productive landscapes for our agricultural system. And honestly, just beautifying our neighborhoods as well from a gardener's perspective. It's just nice. This is American Wild Plum in Eden Park. If any of you know where the Watchtower is, it's the tallest tower in Eden Park. If you just drive through Eden Park and you keep looking around in a circle like this, you'll eventually find it. But right before you get to the Watchtower, on a street called St. James, in about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, the American Wild Plum, you'll see it on your right, and it'll be covered in insects, like absolutely covered. Small butterflies, big bees, small bees, honey bees, all kinds of native bees and wasps and flies. And all right, this is just going to happen throughout the presentation for some reason. So the cool thing about this is it grew in the savannas, and all it needs is like just being on the edge of a tree, kind of like a red bud. All it needs is a good 4 or 5 hours of sun, and it produces. It does grow in thickets, so it's not great for an open landscape because it'll run and create more. But if you can get it on a wood edge, or if you can get it like on the side of your house where you're okay with a continuous hedge growth, or if you can get it in a hedge where it can run a straight line thicket, like this is mowed around in a circle, so it's a circle. It's pretty applicable to our gardens, and the reason why I'm promoting it is not only are they beautiful and they have that beauty aspect of just being covered with pollinators, it also produces an edible fruit. So this, you can imagine it's called American Wild Plum because it truly is a plum. Most of the plums we eat in the stores are, they don't have much American genetics in them. They have most of the European genetics from those forms of plums, because the Native Americans did not cultivate the American wild plum and create, agricultural forms, but Europeans did for a while. So that's most of the plums that we have today. But the American wild plum tastes just like a plum, except it's just a little bit bigger than a quarter because it hasn't been genetically improved over hundreds of years. So with it being able to, but the thing is with the American wild plum versus an orchard plum is going to require some amount of maintenance. I don't know what it requires because I don't know much about that stuff. The American wild plum, you can literally sit on a wood edge, and as long as it gets 5 hours of sun, it's going to take care of itself. And it's not only going to take care of itself, it's going to take care of a lot of other insects that are attracted to the leaves, to the flowers, and to the rotting fruit. That's an actual big source for different insects when the fruit hits the ground and starts to rot. And possums and raccoons.
What about deer and squirrels?
What's that?
Deer and squirrels like it too?
Deer will eat the fruit, and with all these trees that we're talking about today, when you plant it, you want to put a 4-foot fence on it with a 3-foot diameter, and that will allow them to establish and grow higher than the deer browsing line. But deer, I'm not sure if they eat the fruit. It was really a big bear food. This trees that we're about to talk about now, an American wild plum, they're heavily used by bear. So they would travel to find these thickets of persimmon, which we're going to talk about, and plums, and they would literally eat the whole tree worth of plums and then deposit them everywhere. So this is a really tough urban tree. This tree is really cool. This is the American persimmon. This is in Avondale. That's the library across the street. This is a very wind-exposed area. The soil is somewhat compacted because the lot that it's growing on is, I think it's an old home lot, and the home was demolished, and the trees that were planted in the front yard have just been left. And it's a cut-through area, so there's a lot of foot compaction. And these trees are definitely the healthiest, biggest persimmon I've ever seen locally. They create these fruit that these aren't quite ripe, but once they're a little bit more ripe, they'll turn a little bit more orange. And they taste really good as long as you eat them at the right time. If you eat them too early, it turns your mouth dry. It's not a bad taste, but it's a bad feeling. But once they've been frosted a couple of times, or even if this past fall where we didn't have early frosts, they just naturally ripened without the frost by late October, November, depending on what tree you're picking from. But since this tree is so tightly grained, it literally, this is so wind exposed, when you look up the canopy, you can't see any signs of past branch breaking. This has been through the Ike winds. It's been through everything in a very exposed format, but it still doesn't show any form of wind damage. And that's important because if the tree is only going to get maximum 40 feet tall and it's extremely wind tolerant, then this is something that you can line the east and west side of your house with because it's so safe. If you go through Mount Lookout in Hyde Park and you see the big, huge oaks that people planted 60, 70, 80, 90 years ago, and the current people still have allowed most of them to be right next to their house, they wouldn't still be there if they were falling on those houses. Oaks, hickories, persimmon, there's certain trees that are just extremely safe to plant next to your house. You always want to have an arborist, probably not with a persimmon, but with the big trees like oaks, because they can get, branches this thick going over your house. But overall, this is one of the safest trees to plant on the east and west side of your house, which maximizes energy efficiency of your house. That cooling of the morning sun and cooling of the western sun and the western winds, and then leaving the south side exposed to sun to an extent, maximizes the ability of your house to absorb sun in the winter through the south, and then shade the west and east in the morning and late afternoon. So not only does it produce this pretty, beautiful fruit, which is definitely, going to start some conversations in your neighborhood, or at least maybe with your neighbor. It produces these seeds, and I haven't experimented with it yet, but the Indians and pioneers made a coffee substitute out of it. I don't know how. The Indians roasted them and ate them like nuts. So this is a tree that has two crops, and with seeds being the most nutritionally and energy-dense food known to man, more so than meat, more so than anything. No one's done the nutrition facts on persimmon seeds, but you can assume that there's good things in these. Like, for example, the nuts, the pecans or the walnuts and the hazelnuts, they're like 600 calories per 100 grams, whereas meat is like 140 calories per 100 grams. That's just because meat has a lot of water in it. But and then they also hold, like, comparison meat versus like seeds. The seeds are going to hold so much of the vitamin B complex, so much more of the minerals, and so much more vitamins like vitamin E and other vitamins, that when you eat a seed from the wild, if it's edible, then it's going to be a really nutritious thing compared to our typical diets. And you can make unhealthy things out of them too. So that's always fun. Actually, some of those things don't look too far from persimmons, but the pies, skeptical about. So these are chestnuts. Chestnut hybrids are mixed with European, Chinese, American. I think those are the three that are typically mixed in, maybe a fourth. But they're so mixed, you can barely call them anything now. You just call them a chestnut hybrid. And they grow super fast. Someone told me they have fragrant flowers, but I've only seen them, I haven't smelled them. They have beautiful flowers. So this is a tree that, people might slow down and ease off the pedal as they drive past your house. And then they produce, if you have two of different cultivars or different two non-clones, they produce these really nice sized chestnuts, which you boil or bake, and it reveals the chestnut meat underneath that brown shell, and then you can make whatever out of it. But the reason why I'm talking about these is because specifically the persimmon, the oaks, and the hickories. We're not going to talk about hickories today. We don't have that much time. But the oaks and other tree hazelnuts. If we're thinking about making ecology thrive truly as in somewhat way as it did in the past, where we have continuous biomes, we have to change our agricultural system. So if that means going from a soybean, wheat, corn-based system with sterile fields to nut crops in savanna formats with prairies that are grazed sustainably within the savanna, just like the bison graze sustainably within the savanna, then we're truly talking about allowing ecology to thrive. So this is a very old picture of some huge pawpaws. And pawpaws, they're a fun plant. And when it comes to nutritional value, did you have a question?
Yeah, do pawpaws really take over? Because I have some pawpaw seeds, but I'm afraid to plant them because I don't want them to take over the whole
It all depends on the format. It's
Yeah.
like the American wild plum,
Okay.
where if you plant it on a wood edge, specifically pawpaw, you want to do on an eastern or a western, not a southern wood edge. But if you plant it on a wood edge, it will sucker like a wild plum and create its own little thicket. But if you plant it in a lawn like that and you mow around it, then it can't thicket.
Okay.
Yeah. So the American or the pawpaw, it has a very similar nutritional value to a banana. It's even superior in some aspects. This is what it looks like when you get a big fruit, which is going to come from like a full sun-grown tree, and you cut it open and you pull out the seeds. This is after the seed removal. It'll be lined with big black seeds. Like that one probably had like maybe 12 or 14 seeds in it. And once you pull those out, you have the pulp, which people make all kinds of things out of. But engaging people with these fruits that have connection to the big picture, that I think is something that is a huge opportunity for us to do with our neighbors in our communities and in this metropolitan setting or even rural residential setting, because people are easily engaged with food. These are American hazelnuts at UK Arboretum. They have a really nice fall color. These are probably these have probably been around for probably about 4 or 5 years. And they're probably maybe about 8 feet tall, 4 feet wide. And the American hazelnuts have been hybridized with European hazelnuts because once again, the Native Americans didn't try to improve the American hazelnut, so it was a very small, a much smaller nut. But the European hazelnuts, or they typically call them filberts, they have been improved for a long period of time on fruit size and production. So they hybridized them to get this tough shrub of a mix of American and European hazelnuts. They call them hybrid hazels. This could be a huge fruit or seed crop of the future. This one has, it's like top 2 or top 3 in the amount of calories it has per 100 grams. It's like 670 calories per 100 grams, whereas, like I said, meat, somewhere between 140 and 180. Having a grain that concentrates so much energy, which we need. I know we try to avoid calories, but when it comes to food selection, we really need to be growing things that concentrate calories so we use less land. This is a huge crop of the future, and they're pretty too, as you can see. So that's a nice one to add to a prairie. They actually naturally invaded prairies as well. The American hazelnut naturally invaded prairies, which means their root systems can compete well with prairie planting. This is Arthur Haynes from the Northeast. He is holding a container of milled acorn flour through a hand mill. He's going to pour that pitcher of glass into that big bowl and quickly or easily leach the tannins out of the acorn. The acorn, as it was in the past for the Native Americans, hopefully will again be a future crop for America, because with having oaks and hickories and hazelnuts and persimmons with prairies in between, that is not just producing food for us, that's producing biodiversity for, everything. And the process is pretty simple. That's a YouTube video. I'll add it in the email link. The swamp white oak has always been known as one of the oaks with the least tannins. So it had the sweetest acorns. You can pretty much eat them raw without any leaching. The Missouri Center for Agroforestry made a cultivar called Bucks Unlimited. It was actually made to was actually made to attract deer. That's why they call it Bucks Unlimited, because deer like the swamp white oaks. But what they made in the process is one of the acorns that have the least concentration of tannins that also produces annually, unlike most oaks. So this is getting closer to like an agricultural form of oak that produces annually, has extremely low tannins, won't have to process the tannins out much at all. That's a fun one to add to your prairie landscape and add that food element. These are just acorn bread products. Some of them are mixed with a little bit of wheat, which is not the most harmful thing at all. But a lot of these are mixed with a little bit of wheat, which makes them more fluffy. Pure acorn flour makes more of a, if you've ever had a pure rye bread that's kind of like a thick brick, that's more of a, that's pure acorn flour, whereas cut with wheat and buckwheat will also do it too. If you cut it with buckwheat flour, it'll make it a lot fluffier. So this is one of my favorite plants. It's a local plant. This one has huge potential for all kinds of fun applications. This is riverbank grape. It's a local wild grape, and it grows not only on riverbanks, but it grows in uplands. It grows a lot of places. And it has these leaves that taste citrusy and that have no bitterness to them. It's like, I don't know, if you could take the bitterness out of a lemon and you were left with the citrusy taste, that's how these leaves taste. And so they can become a perennial crop, like we treat, lettuce, cabbage, kale, spinach as leaf crops. This is a perennial crop of leaves that is drought tolerant, extremely vigorous, and not only can you eat the leaves, but you can eat the tender tendrils and the tender stems. So you're getting so much more nutrients out of this plant compared to our average leaf crops. Then these grapes are not big at all. I think this is a very close-up shot. They're about as the size of a marble. But it's been shown through research, when we cultivate plants, whether it's a grape or whether it's corn, when we go back to the original plant and we measure the nutrient contents, we find that these original plants that haven't had their genetics cultivated for bigger flowers or for more fruit production or to be smaller, then the nutritional values of the fruit is much higher than our cultivated form that we eat out of the grocery store. So these grapes kind of taste like the leaves, where if you can take the bite out of a lemon, the grapes taste citrusy. And the photochemicals or phytochemicals they have are very high compared to the grapes that you would buy in the store, which are antioxidants, phytochemicals. And the seed, I'm sure some of you have seen an article or heard someone talking about grape seed oil extract, grape seeds. The seeds taste like grains, where they're kind of bland. Like if you just eat one grain of wheat, you can't really taste it. That's how these seeds taste. So if you were to take bundles of these super nutrient-rich wild grapes and just run them through a blender with the seeds inside, you're creating like a super healthy concoction that also tastes good, also while having a completely edible leaf that you can harvest throughout the year. So this plant should be cultivated definitely in the future. One key thing is, since we've fragmented so much of the forest, we've created all these edges. Remember the biome map where the edges were savanna meets prairie, savanna meets forest, or forest meets wetland, or forest meets river. Those were the edges, and that was it. Now we have edges everywhere, so there's just sunlight everywhere. And the native grapes have really proliferated in that situation, along with all of the non-native invasive plants. So when you plant these grapes, you need to plant them very responsibly and harvest all of the grapes. You don't have to go beat the birds because they're called frost grapes. They don't actually, birds don't even eat these until after multiple frosts. But you can pick these in fully ripe format in September before there's any even frost. So if you're going to plant a wild grape, you don't want to add to the current population so much. You want to harvest all the grapes each year, even if you're going to give them away. And it's not hard. It's not hard to, the way I'm designing for my business, it's going to be in a very easy format to harvest each year to make sure no extra seed is going onto wood edges and strangling honeysuckle plus whatever else is there. In grape vineyards, they have like long lines of this thick wire that goes between thin posts. There's two thick posts, like 6x6s, like 15 feet tall, or 4x4s. I think mostly 6x6s. Really thick posts on the end, and they're at like specific angles. So as these grapes get heavy, the lines stay tight and they don't bend. The formats that we can do in our neighborhood don't have to be so intense because we're literally like I honestly don't like planting private seed plantings. Sorry, I've done a few, maybe for someone in the room too. I don't like the walling off from neighbors. I feel like that's not so productive for what these gardens could mean. But what you could do is, this is a much more friendly planting of a privacy fence. If you have these posts that are about 7 feet above ground and you run about 4 of these wires through them all and you run it for about 30 or 40 feet, you can have this edible, not too tall, easily harvestable grape trellis. Not trellis, but you get where I'm going. These are kind of how they'll be first year, pretty young. And second year, they'll be this big, maybe a little bit bigger. By the third year, they'll probably be even a little bit bigger than this. They're going to grow, by the third year, after they've really established their root systems, they're going to start growing really crazy on these wires. So you don't want anything next to them that they can like grab onto. But the applications you can do just with 4x4s and these wires in these grapes and the health benefits and the beauty of it as well. And then there's wildlife benefits. Even though we're harvesting all the grapes, the biggest contribution of a plant to wildlife is often the leaves, or it's often the stems plus the leaves, because there's a lot of insects that eat the leaves or suck juices out of the leaves. So there's a huge biomass contribution of just having the grapevine there without even birds eating the grapes because you're not allowing them to. So quick points about the grapevine. It has a higher content of combined calcium, iron, and magnesium than spinach, kale, or any other available leaf crop. It also has comparable amounts of vitamin A, C, and K while holding the most protein out of any available leaf crop. It's a potential for a drought-tolerant source of leaves that you don't have to water and plant in the spring every year and then plant it again in the fall. The other points we already talked about with the uncultivated foods having higher nutritional values than the agricultural forms. Also, one point, if you really want those nice orchard sweet grapes, don't expect the leaves to taste good. I tried all the grapevines I could find this year. I was taste testing them, and it was very painful.